Hi there guys, and welcome again to another redgamingtech.com video. As you can see, this time we're having a look at Smite. Hi there guys, and welcome again to another redgamingtech.com video. As you can see, this time we're having a look at Smite, which is currently in closed beta, and as you may not know, is by Hi-Rez, who also do Tribes Ascend, and it is a free-to-play MOBA like League of Legends and all that good stuff. This particular video is going to be having a look at the gods available and all that good stuff. I may do a gameplay video, but I just had a very first match of this game, and to say I was bad is kind of an understatement, because not only was it my first game of this, it was this is my first, how do I put it, my first venture into a MOBA style game, so obviously to say I was bad does not even cover it, so I'm not sure if I want to subject you guys to that. Regardless of all that, let's have a look. As you can see, there's quite a nice list of gods, each from a different pantheon, as you can see. First one here is Agony, god of fire, which is a Hindu pantheon. And obviously, even though I do not currently own this god, I don't think, you can still look at the details. So as you can see, Agony is of course a magical god, doesn't have much defense, and is obviously mostly focused on being range. Does seem to be quite fast, however. Attacks per second is quite nice. Quite a lot of protection against other magic as well. So he seems like a fairly nice god if you are more into staying a little bit back and just pew-pewing from a distance. Next up is Anubis. Is also the god of the dead from the Egyptian pantheon, of course. I doubt there's many of you out there who have not heard of Anubis. So let's have a look. Again, more of a magical thing, but his defense might be weak, but he has this nice average here, so more ranged and maged stuff from Anubis there. Again, quite nice speed and protection from magical stuff. He has some fairly decent regen. Oh, and here we have some abilities, which I forgot to look at for the other one. I'll quickly go back and do that, sorry about that. So, Plague of Locust bellows forth from Anubis' mouth, smothering all enemies and doing 40% of magical power, magical damage every 0.5 seconds per 0.3 cost of mana. Cooldown is quite significant on that. Passive is Sorrow. Ooh, all of Anubis' abilities reduce enemies' magical protection by 12 for 3 seconds, so that's actually pretty nice. Mummify, Bandage, mummifying his target for 3 seconds. Obviously that is to slow or even stop your enemy. Grasping Hands, 35, so this is the damage it can do depending, and plus 35% of your magical power, magical damage every 0.5 seconds and slowing the enemy as well, so that's very, very nice indeed. And Death Gaze, which sounds very powerful, and this is the damage here, plus 45% of your magical power, and up to 70 feet away. However, it costs quite a lot of mana, and as you can see, even the lowest cooldown for this is quite high. So let's go back and have a look at the abilities for Agony. Very sorry about that. Passive is Combustion, which means after you hit 4 basic attacks, you'll get a buff. On the next cast of Flame Wave or Rain of Fire, which obviously I will cover as well, all enemies will be additionally set ablaze that are hitting them take 5 plus 10% of your magical power for every 0.5 seconds. So that's very, very nice buff indeed. Next ability is Noxious Fumes, a cloud of noxious fumes doing 10, 20, 30, 40 or 50 plus 5% of your magical power, magical damage for every 10 seconds. Firing any of Agony's abilities into the fumes detonates the gas, stunning all enemies in the radius for 2 seconds. So his abilities actually seem really nice. I really like the sound of this particular ability, especially the firing into the gas, freezing enemies thing. That sounds very useful indeed. A Wave of Fire ignites noxious fumes, so you could actually do a double there, put down noxious fumes and then send forward Flame Wave to not only freeze from the noxious gas, but to hurt them with some quite nice damage as well. Cooldown, this, you know, not too bad, but it costs more and more mana, as you can see. Next is Path of Flames, which is a quick dash, and it leaves flames behind you, which if enemies have the bad luck to walk through, will not end well for them. That also ignites noxious fumes. And of course, Rain of Fire, storing up to 3. Every 20 seconds gains a flaming halo, storing up to 3, sorry. You can expand the halo to summon a giant meteor. Wow. You can summon one every 0.8 seconds. Ignite noxious fumes. Cooldown is dependent on available halos. Interesting. So some quite nice abilities there for him. Next is our Kang, Dragon King of the Eastern Seas, which is of course a Chinese god there. Again, more of a magical and ranged god there. Graceful Winds, magical power by 5% of maximum mana, so as you gain more mana, your maximum magical power increases. That's quite nice. That's Projectile Breath Attack, obviously some really nice damage there in the later stages, as you can see, plus 60% of your magical power, and it also does it also slows your enemies, sorry. Cost is quite a lot, but the cooldown is not too bad. Next is Slither, and that allows you to move various points faster, up to 17% faster, plus an additional up to 7% for each enemy within a 20-foot radius for 4 seconds. A nearby player will give the maximum benefit. Cooldown is pretty steep, but you can place a tornado here. Small tornado branches off to any enemies that are coming in the radius, doing some fairly nice damage, plus 50% of your magical power. Some pretty hefty cost towards the end, but cooldown is not too bad. Next up is Spirit's Tempest, which will knock enemies to the side. Summons the spirit one of his fallen allies to breathe down destruction to his enemies and a path in front of him, doing plus blah blah magical damage. That's really, really powerful actually. Next up we have Arachne, which is just called the Weaver, and that is the Greek pantheon. We actually have a melee god now with average physical ability, but also some weak magical ability as well. Some fairly decent defense, and obviously, as you can see, is tagged as an assassin as well. So passive is Poison Claws. That obviously does poison damage for every 0.5 seconds for 3 seconds, and does 5 physical damage for the duration. So very, very nice indeed. So, this seems to be kind of like a trap. You can lay eggs, and if enemies get too close to them, it will hatch 2 spiders that will attack. That will slow them by 20% and do some fairly nice damage, plus 17% of your physical power for 10 seconds. Although you can only deploy a maximum of 5 eggs, so watch out there if you're going to be using her. I actually quite like the look of her, she looks pretty interesting. Drain Life. Draining, all that, plus 15% of health as physical damage every 0.5 seconds for 3 seconds. Right clicking or being disabled will knock Arachne off. I wonder if that actually restores your health. It doesn't seem to, as far as I can see. Arachne spins an entangled web, slowing her enemies with a fairly nice radius, and it persists in the area for 10 seconds. Cocoon. Oh, that's a nice projectile. If it hits an enemy god, it wraps them tightly, doing some really nice damage, plus 50% of your physical power, and stunning them for 1 second. As Arachne pulls them to her, cost is quite high, and cooldown is pretty steep as well. Next up we have Aught Amiss, who every self-respecting lore fan should know. It's a Greek pantheon and the goddess of the hunt. She is quite obviously going to be ranged, but let's have a look anyway. Oh, yes. Physical, but definitely range, and as you can see, marked as an assassin, but some decent defense actually for a ranged character. Passive ability is a 5% critical strike chance buff on each successful hit within 4 seconds, and you can stack that 3 times. This is a trap which you can place up to 3 times. That also acts as a ward, so it's kind of a dual thing there. Enemy gods coming within 5 feet of the traps will activate them, rooting the enemy god and doing quite a nice bit of damage, plus 30% of your physical power for every second for 3 seconds. It does, however, cost a fairly decent amount of mana, but the cooldown isn't actually that bad. The Vengeful Assault ability is basically where you attack quickly, and it will also increase your attack speed for various amounts of time, as you can see right here, and costs quite a bit at the higher levels, but cooldown is a little bit steep, but not too bad. If you're in a bit of a tight spot, I can imagine that coming in quite handy. And this fires a volley onto a ground target, suppressing all of the enemies, and anyone unfortunate enough to be caught within the volley is damaged quite significantly, plus 30% of their physical power, and are slowed by 25% for 2 seconds. Cooldown is only 10 seconds, so that's a really nice ability. I'm pretty sure I got hit by that more than once in my rather shoddy game that I had. And finally we have a Caledonian Bore. Yeah, I saw that fella as well. Aught Amiss was hard at work. And it does a really nice amount of damage, plus 100% of your physical power to the nearest enemy god, and also stun them for 2 seconds. The ball will also charge other enemy gods for 6 seconds, which is how long he stays on the field for. Cost is quite high, and so is the cooldown, but I can speak from personal experience that you do not want to be hit by this guy, because if it catches you unawares, yeah, that's pretty much you. Next up we have Bacchus Aura, which is the Great Devourer, and is a Hindu god, but it's not actually a god that I'm personally familiar with. So let's have a little look. As you can see, purely physical, no magic, not great defense to be honest, and is again tagged as an assassin. Passive ability is a speed increase by 4% for each enemy that he kills, and the burst will last for 10 seconds. So that's rather interesting indeed. And you can also do a takedown, which is a leap to your target rotation, doing some very nice damage even at the earlier stage right here, plus 60% of your physical power, and will do 2 physical damage to all the enemies in the area, and will reduce their damage done by 30% for 3 seconds. So he seems like you really don't want to mess with him, to be honest. And you can also eat minions, which will heal you for these varying amounts of damage right here, plus 100% of your physical power, and you also gain a certain percentage of movement speed buff for 6 seconds. Buff wielding minions must be at 30% health, 33% health to be consumed. Up to 6 minions are stored for a future ability called Regurgitate. Doesn't actually cost all that much, and cooldown is fairly decent. Although I can see they put this nice restriction here to stop them from basically spamming it, which I always appreciate. This one is a more of a passive, as you gain various amounts of physical power, and you also gain an additional true damage for each strike for 6 seconds, so that's really nice there. And the final ability is Regurgitate, and you regurgitate all of the minions consumed by the consume minion ability that we talked about earlier at the ground target location. That will slow the enemies by quite a nice percentage, and your attacks will also become cone attacks for 6 seconds. So a quite nasty little god here, as I'm sure you will agree. Bastet, goddess of Egyptian god, and looks very cool indeed. Another physical god here, which is nice after all those melee ones. Passive ability is 9 lives and 25% reduced respawn time for 9 respawns. So if you're a bit of a newer player, that might come in quite in handy, because obviously you're going to be getting killed quite a lot. This is another pounce-like ability, and you can pounce at enemies within 20 feet for a really nice amount of damage, as you can see here. For 4 seconds after pouncing, you can press the button again to pounce back to your initial location. So if you pounce to attack an enemy and suddenly found yourself surrounded, you can pounce back, and basically a quick nothing to do here button to get yourself out of it. And this is a ability that causes your enemies to bleed for this amount plus your 35% of your physical power for 4 seconds, so pretty nice. And 9 tails, and this is a more of a projectile based attack which does a pretty nice amount of damage plus your 100% of your physical power and slows the enemy by 35% for 3 seconds in an 8-foot radius, so a really nice ability there, as I'm sure you will agree. And finally, Cat Call. She can summon 3 cats and attack nearby targets for 10 seconds, also slowing them by 20% and doing them a fairly nice amount of damage plus 20% of her physical power per hit. And the cats will attack bleeding enemies first, so this is quite nice in combination with this ability here. And the summoned cats gain more health per rank, so the stronger you are, the stronger your cats are, which makes perfect sense. Next is Guan Yu, is the Saint of War, which is again a Chinese god there, and is a very cool looking fella. Surprisingly, he is not only magical, but he is also support and tank. So he is more there to absorb attacks and punishment rather than to deal out damage himself. And this is his passive, which seems to make perfect sense, is plus 20 physical and magical protection when he is near friendly or enemy structures. So basically if you're near any sort of tower, you are good to go. Basically this is a heal, and he can also heal his allies, and how much you do kind of depends, plus 35% of your magical power. And if you heal friendly gods with this ability, you will reduce all cooldowns by 2 seconds. So this is a charging ability where after you've passed through, all enemies are damaged by this amount plus 50% of your magical power. And they are also slowed by 25% for 2 seconds, and of course if you hit enemy gods it lowers cooldowns by 2 seconds, so you're definitely rewarded for attacking other enemy gods to make them more vulnerable to the other players, which is very nice indeed for anyone who likes to play support. So this is a more speedy attack by the sound of it, and it does fairly nice amount of damage plus 15% of your magical power, doing magical damage every 0.4 seconds for 4 seconds. Each hit also debuffs the enemy's protections by 10, while buffing Guan Yu the same amount up to 30 for 3 seconds. And you also cannot be knocked back when you are doing this, or when you have that protection on you, should I say. So he actually seems quite nice. I don't know if I would play him myself because I like to be right in there and all that good stuff. This is a thrice attack. You attack 3 times, enemies take this amount of damage depending, plus 20% of your magical power, and also slowed by 25% for 2 seconds. Any enemies you hit a second time take damage plus 50% and are silenced for 2 seconds. Enemies who take a third time take damage plus 100% and are stunned for 2 seconds, and you are immune to crowd control for the duration. So some very nice abilities indeed for Guan Yu.